their limitations to their God-given possibilities. I'm an author, a speaker, a minister, a mentor, and a savvy social media strategist. Today, we're talking about big comebacks and essentially your biggest comeback ever. So I'm going to share some things with you about my life and some of the setbacks and comebacks that I've had to make during the years. I started, of course, as a hopeful, energetic, excited youth, as we all did, and I had high hopes as a child. But as life progressed on, my limiting beliefs that I adopted as a child started to emerge. Now, in my high school years, I had a very successful high school career. I mean, I was junior class queen, senior class president, cosmetology class president. You could say I majored in popularity. That lack of focus and that lack of goals eventually led me on a path that I would not recommend to anyone. Led me to a place where those limiting beliefs actually, what I did was I left home. I moved to New York because my mother lived in New York, and I always wanted to be with my mother. Although I had been raised in a wonderful middle class environment, I had this dream of always living with my mom, and so I moved to New York. Once I got to New York, I was this young person, no goals, and I started to hang out with the wrong crowd of people, and I started to make all type of foolish decisions. Lack of focus, lack of purpose, all making choices and decisions that would impact me actually essentially for the rest of my life. And so what happened was I ended up with 2 children and basically on welfare. Now, I had a cosmetology license because cosmetology was my major in high school. And I had become a licensed beautician even before I graduated high school. So I still did that to a limited degree because remember, lack of focus, lack of purpose, and hanging with the wrong crowd, hanging with the wrong people. So as I progressed through life, there was so much chaos around me that eventually I got to a place where I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And what I did was I reconnected with my childhood faith. And upon reconnecting with my childhood faith, I realized I can do better than this. And I don't want to live like this. Talking about your biggest comeback ever. So what I did was I decided to attend college. But even after I decided to attend college, I received a letter in the mail for people receiving welfare to see if anyone wanted to have a profession or a position as a bank teller or a securities processor. Well, as I read the letter, I said, well, this sounds a little bit interesting. So what can I do with this? Well, I knew I did not want to be a bank teller, but the securities processing sounded interesting. Now at this time, I'm already in college, and I began to take these other classes toward securities processing. During the course of that, I got a job. I began in the securities processing industry, and eventually I graduated from college. I entered a field known as corporate trust. Corporate trust is essentially trustees' duties for bond financing, and there are some other specialties that trustees or corporate trust banks handle. I entered this field as a bond clerk, just coming out of the welfare system, and at this point, I would say my first time really having goals. Still really not knowledgeable about the industry or what went on in the industry. I consumed every bit of information that I could find. And so I soon began to progress. Well, one day while I'm sitting at my desk reading and reviewing the back of a corporate bond in about 1.5 million in issuance, I reviewed the back of the bond to create a cheat sheet for the bond administrator. And you can say I had an aha moment. It suddenly occurred to me that I knew all of the language on the deal enough to create a cheat sheet for the bond administrator. And it was as though the light went off, and I said, hey, I can do this. And once I came to that realization, I began to just consume all the information and follow the lead of some of the people that I wanted to emulate in the industry. And so eventually I began to climb the corporate ladder. And I went from bond clerk to a bond administrator, from a bond administrator to a trust officer, from a trust officer to an assistant vice president, from an assistant vice president to a vice president, certified corporate trust specialist, and relationship manager. In fact, I loved the industry so much that my colleagues began calling me Miss Corporate Trust. You see, I could do the deals from soup to nuts. And I enjoyed working with the attorneys and the investment bankers and the brokers and all the different people who contributed to putting a deal together. So, working in corporate trust was something that I absolutely loved. And while you'll run into a lot of people who call working in corporate America the rat race, I can honestly say I enjoyed every single day that I worked in corporate trust. I was very good at it because I studied it. It was like an art. They say, is it an art or is it a science? It was a little bit of both, but it was my niche, and I fit right in. In fact, two of the senior people came to me and asked me at a point, would you consider moving to Atlanta? Because we just acquired a new book of business down there. We need someone to go down there who knows the business that can help us get that office acclimated, because there's a full staff of people down there, and it's a book of business that we've acquired. And so, would you be interested in doing something like that? And I went home and I thought about it, and I asked my family and I prayed about it, and I said, sure, I'll do it. I'll move to Atlanta. With my wealth of knowledge about the business and the industry, it never occurred to me that I would be perceived as an outsider once I reached Atlanta. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't fit right in. But I didn't. And so I left the bank after about a year that moved me to Atlanta for another opportunity, a seemingly wonderful opportunity at another bank in Atlanta. Once I arrived at that bank, I found out that this was not the ideal situation either. You see, this manager had problems with, I guess, other people and senior people. I was not the first casualty, I should say, but the individual wielded a lot of power. And so after 3 years at that bank, with 2 years of unbelievable harassment, I was basically forced to resign. Well, it was at that point in time that I asked myself, what are you going to do now? You're 50. And you've essentially been drummed out of a career that you absolutely loved. I had options. I could have returned to New York. But looking at everything that had happened, I thought to myself, Why do you want to go back into an industry where you've invested so much of your life, and just with the allegations of someone, uh, which everyone knew was not true, this could happen, that you could be forced to resign? Do you really want to work in an industry like that? Well, after a while, I I finally just gave up the desire to go back into the industry, even in Atlanta. And so I had to delve a little bit deeper. Now, I talked to you earlier about limiting beliefs, and part of those beliefs began to try to resurface. But by this time, I already knew better. I already knew that once you do all that you can do and you can't do any more, then you go where you're celebrated and not where you're tolerated. And so I decided, I had been listening to Robert Kiyosaki, and he told a story about his dad and how his dad at 50 years old had run for governor of Hawaii. And because he ran for governor of Hawaii, his opponent actually blackballed him, and that he didn't win the election, and he couldn't get a job back because he'd been blackballed. And so he went into the ice cream business, and an ice cream franchise he bought, and basically lost everything there. Now, this was the poor dad and not the rich dad. And what Robert Kiyosaki was talking about was the mental toughness that it takes to be an entrepreneur. Well, by this time, I had been listening to so much self-help, and of course, reading my favorite book, which is the Bible, which I use in my life as well as in my business. And I decided, this sounds attractive. But of course, there was no income, so I needed to get a job. So even though I went out and I got a job, I realized that working on my job alone was never going to satisfy me, that I needed to also work my dream. And I began to work my dream. I wrote and published my first book. A guy named Peter Daniels, a billionaire from Australia, had come to my church, and I asked him what I needed to do to be a public speaker. And someone else asked him what they needed to do to write a book. And so he answered, well, to write a book, you get the title of the book, you get the title of the chapters, and you fill everything in. And armed with that simple instruction, I went home and began to write my first book, Destiny: 7 Steps to Finding and Fulfilling Your Purpose in Life. And I completed that book and published that book, and then I started my company, In His Season Inc., a Christian training and development company. So I began to work on my dream. And even with the limiting beliefs, there were times that I had to say, shh, be quiet, limiting belief. I'm not listening to you. I know that what you're saying to me is not true. Have you ever seen the movie Divergent? I love that movie. I watch it over and over and over again. The whole premise on the movie Divergent is that people have been put into these little cookie cutter mold designations. And people who really are outside the box thinkers, there's no place for them in that world. They call them divergent. Well, I began to think like a divergent. I knew I would never be truly satisfied unless I could live my dreams and fully fill and fulfill my potential in life. And so with that, I began moving toward helping other individuals, because one of the things I truly wanted to do after coming out of life in corporate trust was to give back. I remember where I started, and I wanted to help other people. I wanted to let people know, you may start there, but you don't have to end there. You may have limiting beliefs, but you can overcome those beliefs. You can overcome fear with faith. You can overcome anxiety with patience. You can look beyond your limitations to your God-given possibilities. Everyone has a purpose. Everyone just needs to plan to fulfill their dream. So with all of the things going underway, I decided a little bit later on that I was going to publish a second edition of my book. And I did that. Well, you see, the first edition that I published, I got some help with through another publisher. But I learned so much about publishing through the first time that I published the book that the second time my company published the book. Not only did we publish the book, we also published an audio book. I'm so excited about the times that we live in. You see, there is no shortage of resources if you decide what you really want to do. If you want to overcome and reach beyond those limitations to your God-given possibilities, it's possible. It's possible for you to overcome any obstacle that faces you. Now, I knew that in order to be the best that I could be, the first thing I had to work on was me. And that's your reality as well. So I attended conference after conference, webinar after webinar, teleseminar after teleseminar, just to refine all of the things that I wanted to do. I began to establish relationships with people who were in multi-level marketing industry, internet industry, social media, marketing, branding, whatever it took to get involved in the things that I wanted to do. I began to follow those individuals, to connect with those individuals, to interact with those individuals. Well, why am I telling you this? Because basically, if you want to reach beyond your limitations to your God-given possibilities, you're going to have to connect with other individuals who are actually doing that. You're going to have to invest in you. You're going to have to invest in yourself. You know, you can't fall back on those limiting beliefs. You have to know how to tell those limiting beliefs that you don't believe them anymore, that you can do this, that you have purpose and you want to fulfill that purpose, that you want to reach beyond those limitations to your God-given possibilities. That is possible and it is doable. You see, if I wanted to make my biggest comeback ever, then I had to invest in myself. I remember when I was in banking, all of the bond deals I closed, millions and millions and millions of dollars in bond deals. I remember being the only African American in the closing room at times. I remember being the only female at times in some of the corporate closings. And I said, you know, all of that knowledge is applicable. All of the things that you've already gone through is applicable. You just take those skills, those talents and abilities, and they're transferable. Now, I had made a big comeback from the time that I was a child with those limiting beliefs, and then going to college and graduating, and then going into an industry that I absolutely loved for 17 years. That was a blessing. And regardless of how it ended, my life was not over, and I did not allow other people to write my life scripts. But I had taken my life in my hands with the grace of God, and now I was ready to pursue and have my greatest comeback ever. And I'm telling you that there is no limiting belief, there is no obstacle, there's nothing that's in your way that without the right goals, without the right focus, that you cannot overcome. So are you ready for your biggest comeback ever? Let me tell you, out of everything that I've said, if I've not touched on any point that has resonated with you, I want to leave you with this. And that is one word, and that word is resilience. You see, because it's not if you fall, it's when you fall. It's not if you fall, it's when you fall. And when that happens, you're going to need resilience. You know, I think it's either Willie Jolly or Les Brown who says that when you fall, hopefully you'll fall on your back, because if you can look up, you can get up. But I say if you fall and you fall on your knees, say a prayer, and get up anyway. You see, you have to be resilient. You have to be like the rubber band. That rubber band, when you stretch it and stretch it, and when you stretch it to capacity and release it, does it stay where it was? No, it goes beyond where it was. You have to be resilient. To reach beyond your limitations to your God-given possibilities, you have to be resilient. For your biggest comeback ever, you have to be resilient. So let me say this. One of the first books that I read was Think and Grow Rich, and there's a poem in there. And that poem just resonated with me so much. It says, I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty store. For life is a just employer, gives you what you ask. But once you've set the wages, why you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn dismayed that any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. What are you asking of life? Are you ready to make your biggest comeback ever? Are you ready to face the fear? Are you ready to face the fear and go over the obstacles? Are you ready to be stretched to capacity and once released to go beyond your limitations to those God-given possibilities? Are you ready for your biggest comeback ever? I think you are. I think that by attending this conference, you're receiving all the information you need, because you know why I say that? Because when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Well, I've enjoyed my time with you today, and I have a really special offer for you because I want to talk to you about where you're going, your plans, and the things that you want to do with your life. So what I have for you today is a 30-minute free coaching session with me. 30 minutes for free with me. Now, I have to tell you, I'm only taking the first 10 people for that free coaching 30 minutes with me. All right? So what I want you to do is go to teresitaglasgow.com. That's www.teresitaglasgow.com/comeback. teresitaglasgow.com/comeback for your free 30-minute coaching session with me. On another note, we talked about resilience. Well, I want to announce that there is a book soon to be released with the title Resilience, Living Life by Design. And it is the work, a compilation of 12 brilliant women, of whom I happen to be one. This book is soon to be released, and if you want information on when that book is going to be released, then go to that same site, www.teresitaglasgow.com/comeback, and you'll be put on my list to be notified about when the book is coming out. Resilience, Living Life by Design. We are happy that we have the endorsement of Barbara Cochran from the Shark Tank on that book, and it's not really completed yet, but it is soon to be released. And so again, you want to be notified when the book is out, Resilience, Living Life by Design. Just go to my website again and connect with me on social media. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you're doing with the information that you gained on the biggest comeback ever. Thank you for your time, and remember that one thing you're going to need: resilience for your biggest comeback ever.